Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. The Pituitary Network Association is a nonprofit organization that operates with support from our members and donors. We offer this webinar series to help educate patients, their families, and their healthcare providers. During today's webinar, please feel free to type in your questions at any time. Please note that all questions will be saved until the end of the webinar. We have allotted time to answer as many questions as possible. Any questions that are not answered will be reserved and answered by email. Today we are joined by Froggy, acromegaly patient and radio co-host of Elvis Duran in the morning show, and his wife Lisa Langley. They have graciously agreed to share their journey with acromegaly with us. Froggy will discuss his journey with acromegaly and how he has worked to overcome the daily struggles of managing a lifelong condition. Lisa will help shed light on living with acromegaly from a loved one's perspective. We are now going to turn this over to Froggy and Lisa. There will be a slight delay as we change presenters. And you should see on your end, there it goes, I can see. All right, it's all yours.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Froggy from Elvis Duran in the Morning Show. I was officially diagnosed in 2010, but my doctors are pretty sure I was living with the disease for at least 10 years before then. I had noticed changes in my body, but they were so gradual that I just chalked them up to either getting older or gaining weight. My jaw had grown so much that the top and bottom were no longer aligned. Speaking became more difficult. My voice had changed, which made being on the radio difficult as well. I had to adapt the way that I spoke, and by the end of almost every single show, my jaw would be sore. I hated the way I looked and became very self-conscious of my appearance. Didn't like taking pictures or any of that stuff. I had to resize my wedding ring a total of 4 times, and my shoe size went from a size 10 to I had a pair of shoes that were size 14s. So I literally felt like I was growing out of my own body. I remember feeling tired, getting bad headaches, sweating profusely all the time. I mean, there'd be times I'd sweat so much that I'd wake up in the middle of the night and my clothes, the pillow, the sheets would all be soaked. I felt like I would have to take a nap almost every day. Granted, I do wake up early in the morning, but on days, even when I didn't, I would just be so exhausted. Severe mood swings due to hormonal imbalance going on. I remember that one minute I'd be perfectly fine, and then something would irritate me, and I'd be in a really bad mood for something that didn't even really matter. And it took a toll on my relationship with both my wife and the rest of my family. While I worked hard to control the bad moods, it was hard because I didn't exactly know what was causing them. It was weird. It was a tough period for me, my entire family, everybody, just not knowing what was going on. Looking back on the experiences of photos now, when I look at pictures as we were getting ready to start this webinar, I saw a picture that I think to myself now, how did I not know what was going on? It seems so obvious now, but I didn't realize what was wrong. Plus, I wasn't even aware that there was a disease that would even cause these kind of changes. So there was no ways that I could have marked it up to acromegaly because I never even heard the word, didn't even know what it was. In 2009, I did some initial research, and I remember seeing the words acromegaly and brain surgery next to each other on a website. And I thought to myself, well, that's not happening. So I shut the computer down and just moved on because the word brain surgery was scary, so I just decided I didn't want to do it. Then one day I was at a golf course, and my mother called me, and she said, I need to ask you a question. And she asked me if I had ever heard of the term acromegaly and told me she was watching Jeopardy, the TV game show the night before, and saw a clue to which the answer was acromegaly. And at that point, when I heard her say that word, I knew that I couldn't ignore it any longer. It was something we had never talked about, but then yet something she had seen and noticed and read about, and I had as well. I went online. I went on the website acromegalyinfo.com, and there's a list of symptoms there if you think you have it. And I want to say there were like 8 or 10 symptoms, and I had 7 to 9 of them. I had all but one. So I felt I needed to discuss all of my suspicions with my primary care physician. And so I made an appointment actually a week later, 7 days later, I made a first appointment. But I did a lot of reading in that week. In between setting up the appointment and then doing actually seeing the doctor, I had gotten really educated on what acromegaly was and what exactly was needed and what the symptoms were. When I walked in to my primary care physician, I asked her if she had heard of acromegaly, and she said yes, and she said, but you don't have it. And so I said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, I've never seen anybody with it, and I've been practicing for 20 years. And I said, well, with all due respect, it doesn't mean I don't have it. So I pushed forward for a pituitary MRI because I knew that that was what was needed due to my research online. They found a tumor growing on my pituitary gland. So I was referred to an endocrinologist, which before this process, I didn't even know what an endocrinologist was. After going through some more testing, the endocrinologist confirmed that I did have acromegaly and that I needed to have pituitary surgery to have the tumor removed. Shortly after diagnosis, about a month, I had pituitary surgery to remove the tumor. The surgeon was not able to remove the tumor and informed me and my family that I would require medical treatment for the rest of my life and to monitor my hormone levels to keep everything normal. A week after pituitary surgery, 7 days to the day, I had to undergo emergency surgery on my colon to have a portion removed. The excess growth hormone had caused a massive buildup of polyps, and so I was having trouble there as well. Once I got through the initial surgeries, my endocrinologist and I focused on finding the right management plan. It did take some adjustments. I tried different medical therapies and found one that finally worked for me, and I'm still doing the same today. About a year after being diagnosed, I decided to have surgery to repair my jaw because it had become so enlarged that, like I said before, I had difficulty eating and speaking. This was probably the most difficult surgery of any of the three, just because it was the longest recovery and the most difficult without being able to eat and, I mean, literally at times learning how to speak again and how to eat again. So many, different things. Waiting each time makes you anxious, between the initial brain surgery and the jaw surgery. It was a year in between that. So you spend a year being anxious of wondering, when the next one's going to come. You just want to kind of get it over with. Many times I felt like I was going to just, so much stress and pressure. But at the same time, with Lisa and my family and friends around me, it was able to help me get through it and maintain myself. And I knew that at the end of the tunnel there was a light, and that I was finally going to feel better. I was doing the right thing. As I talk to you today, I have my disease under control. I look back and realize now how draining it all was. As I sit here and talk to you, it even is a little shocking to me sometimes, everything that's happened. I was consumed by all the changes that were taking place for sure, but even after being diagnosed, I thought about the disease almost every single day. There wasn't really a day that I would wake up that I didn't think about having it. It's not easy remembering to take medication or stay on top of doctor's appointments, but I know if I don't do them, I can just end up back where I was again back in 2010. I'm diligent about taking medication as directed and having hormone levels checked every 6 months because that's what the endocrinologist has told me to do. I've learned that if something isn't right, like if I notice a change in symptoms or if my IGF-1 or my growth hormone levels are out of range, I have to immediately contact a doctor and see if changes need to be made to my treatment plan. I'm the first to admit that just like anything else, there's times in the past when I get a little lax about some of the management plan, but I work quickly to get back on track because I don't want to be where I was again. Also, having my wife Lisa there to help with the reminder. She has no trouble reminding me when I'm doing something wrong, trust me. Makes a huge difference. From getting diagnosed to managing the disease on a daily basis, living with acromegaly has for sure been an emotional roller coaster. I'd say I've gone from feeling relieved about finding a diagnosis because that was my initial. I remember being scared when I didn't know what was going on, but the day I was diagnosed, actually, we stood outside the endocrinologist's office. Lisa was crying, and I went to go play golf because I felt relief. I'm like, at least I knew what was going on. I was scared of having pituitary surgery for sure, but I felt like there was at least a plan now. I knew what was causing all of these issues that I was having. I would say probably the best thing that's happened through all this is Lisa and I's relationship has been extremely strengthened because she's been there through everything. She went to every single doctor's appointment with me. I didn't go to one by myself ever. I was never alone. And she's there to make sure that I take my medication now and make sure that I stay on top of what I'm supposed to be doing. There were times I did get very depressed, for sure. I absolutely hated the way I looked. I didn't like taking pictures. And being in the entertainment industry, we take a lot of pictures. I never liked taking pictures. I didn't like pictures around the house of myself. It was very depressing. So I did see a therapist because I didn't really understand how to deal with it. And no matter how much Lisa would try and kind of make things feel better, um, it was almost like, well, you don't really understand because you're not in my shoes. So I did see a therapist that made me feel better about what was going on. My coworkers, between Elvis and Danielle and Bethany and everybody on the show, they've been a great support system for me as well. Everybody was extremely supportive during diagnosis and initial treatment. None of them had even heard of acromegaly before. Yet they all wanted to learn more and help in any way that they could. I can't count the number of times that Elvis would take time to talk to me, and then afterwards I found out even Lisa during our treatments. Going through this together really strengthened all of us together as a family. Talking to other acromegaly patients and advocacy groups like Pituitary Network has been motivating. I remember immediately after diagnosis reaching out to other people who were living with the disease and people that I didn't even know, people that were in acromegaly community and stuff like that. It was nice to talk to somebody who had the disease, who would understand that it was nice to have somebody tell me, and the same feelings that I had inside were coming out of their mouth. That was extremely comforting. Since being diagnosed, I've seen compassionate people that I did not have the best relationship with before, yet they were extremely compassionate and understanding of what was going on. That too was extremely remarkable. I can say that I did feel at the time like acromegaly had ruined my life because of the way I looked. I really was very self-conscious. But now that I've taken control of it, I don't feel defined by it. It's not who I am. It's just something that I have, and being able to be here and do this makes it better. By self-advocating throughout the entire process and not taking no for an answer the day that I went to the primary care and she said, you don't have it, I've been able to get my health back under control. I've returned to living a somewhat normal life and doing the things I enjoy. I play golf on a regular basis. I play basketball with my son, play outside. I'm able to speak on the radio. My speaking is better again. All the hard work and challenges I face are worth how good I feel today. I'll be 40. I've said this before. I'll be 40 later this month. And I feel better as I'm turning 40 than I did turning 30. And that's because when I was turning 30, I didn't know what the hell was wrong with me. I just didn't feel right. It's not to say the struggles that I face, the physical changes, the health issues, the impact on relationships haven't stayed with me, because they have. But now I use them in a positive way to help me stay on track with a management plan to know that I don't want to go back there again. It's unbelievable to think that a tiny tumor can turn your entire life upside down, but it can't. The good news, though, is you can do something about it. You do your research. You're your own best advocate. Nobody knows your body better than you do. Nobody knows what you feel. Nobody knows how you're supposed to feel better than you do. So you can't take no for an answer. If a doctor tells you no, but you really think something's wrong, you just got to push down the path and find out what's going on. So take it from somebody who's walked the walk. You don't have to be defined by acromegaly. You can take control of it. It doesn't have to define who you are. So I'm happy now to turn this over to somebody who has been just the greatest person through this whole deal, somebody I don't know what my life would be without. My wife, Lisa, and she'll share her perspective on what it's like supporting somebody who's extremely stubborn, yet she still sticks around today and has helped me get through this.
Hi, everyone. It's Lisa. I'm happy to be speaking with you today. This journey has been a true roller coaster, and I hope that my experiences will help you and your loved ones along this journey as well. Over the years, I have noticed my husband's appearance was changing, and for the most part, I thought everything was normal. The changes were slow, but odd things were happening, like him growing out of his shoes and wedding ring. His jaw and forehead had also become larger, which was the first indicator to me that something had been wrong. When I first met Scott, he had braces. The years later, I noticed his bottom teeth were crooked. It was like he had never had braces before. It was very odd. That was my biggest sign because I couldn't understand having braces and having such a drastic change. He started having night sweats also. I would have to change his sheets every few days because they would be soaking wet. These changes were happening very slowly, so they weren't as apparent to us. But when we would run into people that we hadn't seen in years, they would notice a significant difference in his appearance and brought it to our attention to, just asking. We didn't have answers. Emotionally, my husband was extremely moody and would fly off the handle the smallest thing, which I now know is hormone related. But living with someone who was temperamental, it was extremely difficult and took a huge toll on a relationship at the time. Scott would get angry about things that didn't even matter, and then he'd be fine a few minutes later. It didn't make sense. Dealing with him was like walking on eggshells. I didn't know what mood was coming next. I tried really hard to deal with his mood swings, and then I came to a breaking point where we hit a low point in our marriage because it was just so too stressful, and none of us understood what was going on. It was a huge relief when he was finally diagnosed because we finally had some answers. When the endocrinologist confirmed he had acromegaly, I was scared, confused, and went into instant panic mode. But Scott was quite the opposite. He was actually relieved. He had a diagnosis and knew where he needed to go from there. From that moment on, I saw him go to try and find an answer. He went to a therapist. He got books. He did a lot of research, things that I couldn't even believe that he did. He took this on full force. But for me, on the other hand, I was a little more emotional. I was upset because I didn't understand. But the love I have for my husband, I found the strength and support I never thought I would have. It was so hard to watch him stay strong when everyone around him was breaking down over this diagnosis. I felt like I was just waiting for him to the best of my ability. I read, I researched, and I listened to Scott talk about the disease and the different procedures he would have to go through. I went to doctor's appointments with him, and I made sure to pay attention to all the details. I went to every doctor appointment, actually. Even if he didn't show it, I knew it was overwhelming him. And I so tried to comfort him and remind him that we would still get through this together. We had a great support system, and we still do. My husband may be the one living with acromegaly, but as his wife, we face and manage the disease together. Doing small things like looking at his hands and his forehead for any swelling, checking on his general mood has become habits of mine and the rest of our family. I make sure he stays on top of his medication, schedule his appointments, and blood tests. We monitor his hormone levels to ensure that he stays on track with that as well, because that's very important. Noticing any irregularities is important so we can share this information with his doctor. As a loved one supporting someone living with acromegaly, it is so important that you are there for them every step along the way. Whether you understand it or not, you need to read, you need to do some research, and you need to be there for them. Whether it's big stuff like surgery or small day-to-day stuff, everything makes a difference when you're facing this lifelong disease. Everything makes a difference. From the very beginning, this journey has been scary and confusing, not only for my husband, but also for me and our family. Since the moment Scott was diagnosed, our families, Elvis Duran and his team, and our friends showed immense support, giving us the hope that we needed. Elvis and I talked for hours at a time about what we needed to do for Scott and how we could help him. And his support has been wonderful for me at the point when I didn't understand and needed answers as well. My oldest daughter really stepped up to help out during this diagnosis and initial treatment as well. We needed extra help around the house taking care of our younger son while we went through the process of figuring out what the next step was. Excuse me. I realize that you can deal with this on your own, but you also need a shoulder to lean on. You can't do it alone. You just need help. You need support. Things are good now. We lead a very normal life, and we're going to continue doing that by ensuring his disease remains under control. I've learned that more than half the battle is to realize that you can live with this, and that it is possible to have somewhat of a normal life. My son and I try to remind that every day and help Scott with his disease. The one thing I would have to emphasize for anyone living with acromegaly would be to always stay 100% honest with what's going on with your body and your loved ones. If something is wrong, you need to tell someone. because it's so important to make sure your hormone levels don't become uncontrolled, and we can't help you if we don't know. I'm so proud of my husband's strength through this process and for being an advocate and resource for other acromegaly patients. I can't say enough what an inspiration he's been, and I'll stand by him forever. Anything. I will always help him, and I hope you all do the same.